Hey everybody, welcome to episode 6 of Cleaning Code with Doc Norton. I'm still Doc Norton. This episode I'm pretty excited about. First 5 episodes we have been kind of working our way through the JDepend library with a specific focus on a class called FileManager that from the very onset I felt like this isn't quite right. There's responsibility in here, probably doesn't belong here. This feels convoluted. Today is the day. This is the episode. At the end of this episode, FileManager is gone from JDepend. Let's see how it happens. All right, so we want to take CollectFiles and we want to do a little bit of a transformation on it here. What we want to do is adjust the logic. We don't need it to read this way. So, and we want to get ready to actually move it into ClassContainer. So first thing we're going to do is just abstract out subcontainer and let's move that up in the file. Which is going to cause a couple of issues for us, but we'll fix those. We'll surround it with a try-catch, and we'll actually invert our conditional. So rather than checking to see if it's a class file first, and then if it's a directory, blah, 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 what we're going to do is just go ahead and attempt to make a container out of it. If it is a valid container, then we're going to go ahead and collect the files out of it. If it's not, then we'll check to see if it is actually a class file and go ahead and add it to the list. And you'll see how this actually helps us as we roll forward. All right, we don't need to call accept file because of where we are in the for loop and because we've already attempted to create a container. All we actually have to do is verify that this is an acceptable class file name. All right, let's start moving some more stuff out of FileManager. We can now take accept class file name and we can actually move it out of here. Let's go ahead and move it into ClassContainers. All right, now we want to clean this up just a little bit before our next steps. We don't need to declare subcontainer outside of the try block, so let's just shove it inside of there. And we now have a dead method because we no longer call accept file. All right, getting ready to push a variation of collect files from FileManager into the directory class container. But before we do that, I'm going to make this abstract in class container and then move the current collect files from class container into archive class container. We're just setting ourselves up for the ability to ultimately move the method from FileManager into directory class container and get this whole thing to work. So we'll go ahead and pop this over here, implement that particular method, drop the contents of the method in there, and then we're going to go to the directory class container, and we will right now actually do a null implementation. All right, if we're going to push collect files into the directory class container, then accept class file name has to be somewhere that it can see it, and FileManager is not the right place. So we're going to do a couple of things here. First, there's some logic we can just clean up in this sucker, make it read a little bit better as far as I'm concerned, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to push it from FileManager into class container so that our implementations now have access to it. Now, it turns out we can't just push this from class containers to class container because class container has no concept of whether or not we accept inner class files. So we're going to go ahead and actually add that as a parameter so that we can just go ahead and pass it through. This is going to end up being temporary. I'm almost positive of it. This is already letting us know that we need better concept of what is a Java class for this whole thing. But for now, let's do this, and it'll get us to the next step. All right, we're getting ready to make the big move here. So we want to get CollectFiles over into the various class container classes. So the first thing we're going to do is just pull out everything that has to do with a directory class container into a separate method so that it's easier to push when we're ready. And we probably remember that the directory class container needs to know about class file name and whether or not we're going to accept an inner class. Let's go ahead and make this directory class container so that it's specific, so that it will be, when we get ready to push it, it'll push it into the right place. And then we're going to go ahead and add our Boolean to represent whether or not we accept inner class files. All right, so now we're going to cast the incoming container to a directory container to avoid the compilation error, directory class container more specifically. And then we're going to change our call to accept class file name from ClassContainers to the new static that's in class container. We're going to have to pass it the Boolean as well. So all this is still getting us prepared to be able to actually move this thing. All right, when we run the tests, it turns out that we've got one failing. Let's go take a look at that test and see what it is. There's not much there that's telling me anything. Let's go back to FileManager and take a look. It's probably something simple. And yep, it turns out that when we did the refactoring, we defaulted to true, and that was not what we wanted to have happen, except inner classes should actually be passed through. Okay, we're green. So let's go ahead and rename Get Directory Collection to CollectFiles, getting us even more prepared to go ahead and move it over. All right, let's go ahead and do the big move. We're going to move CollectFiles over into directory class container now. Got a bit of a warning because FileManager is being passed through. Let's let that happen. And then when we actually get into directory class container, let's change the reference from the call to CollectFiles in FileManager to the container.collectfiles, which should take care of that compilation issue. All right, let's see how we did. Ooh, 10 errors. Okay, no pointer exceptions. I think this actually might have to do with the fact that the FileManager is being passed in. So let's get rid of that. You know what makes even more sense? It's probably this null we're returning in the default override of CollectFiles. Let's take care of that. All right, now we're down to one error, and that is because right now we're telling it that CollectFiles is always true. And that's not the case. We know that CollectFiles needs to actually come in as a parameter. So we're going to have to go to the abstract class, change the method signature so that it always accepts the parameter. And then we're going to go through all of the code and make sure that that parameter is being properly passed, most often right now from ClassContainers. And we should be able to get to green within a matter of a couple of minutes here. Now, some of you probably noticed I didn't do a proper refactoring here. I should have gone into the abstract class and actually done a change signature Instead, what I did was I brute force changed the signature, actually causing a lot more work for myself. I thought about going back and re-recording this piece, but I decided to leave it as it was. I want everyone to know that we all make these mistakes sometimes. All right, that fiasco behind us. Let's go look at collect files in FileManager. We don't need this guard clause anymore, and we don't need these two separate calls. Now, under all conditions, we basically just call container collect files, passing in class containers except inner classes. Once we've got that done, we can actually inline the method, and we have now eliminated collect files entirely from FileManager. All right, next step, since extract files receives class containers and then basically operates on class containers only, let's move extract files into class containers. All right, so at this point, isValidContainer is the only method left in FileManager that isn't basically a pass-through to class containers, at least the only public one. So let's go ahead and make that happen by pushing all of these supporting methods into class containers, allowing us to then push isValidContainer into class containers. All right, now we're set, and we can actually do that push, and isValidContainer goes into class containers. Oh, can you feel it? I can feel it. We're going to inline these three methods in FileManager and leave ourselves with a FileManager empty shell. Let's see what happens here. All right, now we want to actually pull FileManager out of the Java Class Builder. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to Java Class Builder. We're going to introduce a new class container. We're going to equate it with the FileManager class container for just a brief period here and go through and remove all of the FileManager references that are inside of Java Class Builder so that it's actually referencing the class container that we just introduced. This will allow us to then remove FileManager from Java Class Builder altogether. Now we want to be able to instantiate Java Class Builder with a class containers instead of FileManager. So let's go ahead and add that. All right, what we're racing through right now is really basic work. I am replacing any reference to FileManager with a reference to class containers and letting really the tests kind of drive me along. If I make a change and something breaks, go back, adjust the test, and otherwise keep rolling. All right, so we've moved every reference to FileManager out of our Java class builder, except for this one constructor. And this constructor is still being called from JDepend. So we need to go ahead and go into JDepend, change it so that it uses class containers. That allows us to come back into this, remove this constructor, and then remove FileManager altogether from Java class builder. All right, so JDepend passes class containers to our Java class builder. As it works out, JDepend also doesn't need any FileManager anymore, so we're going to go ahead and go through and remove any reference to FileManager and make sure that we are using class containers any place that we were using FileManager as a pass-through. All right, for the final and most exciting piece of this entire episode, we now know that we do not need FileManager. So let's go ahead and go in, take a look at it, make sure that there's no references to it, delete the final constructor, go ahead and delete the final class. We'll notice that there's a couple of references to it in documentation, but those are fine. We can actually completely eliminate FileManager as a class from this project. All right, that's it for episode 6. We actually went through and eliminated FileManager from the project altogether. I got to be honest with you, I don't know what's going to happen in episode 7. I have not gone that far ahead. So you and I will find out together in the next episode. If you're enjoying these, please give them the thumbs up. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. See you again in episode 7.